Hey guys! This part 4 of What If Naruto became a samurai. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 8. In Search of an Answer. 3 weeks of searching high and low throughout the frigid tundra of Iron Country led Hade to nothing. He dare not venture into Sekiro's city for fear of a clash with the remnants of whoever won that terrible battle. No information was coming out of there just yet, not even from the Hokage's minions, but he strongly suspected that little Naruto wasn't anywhere in Iron now anyway. Which was why he found himself in Hoseki City. Hade had always found Konohagakure to be the most beautiful city he'd ever seen, with rolling forests, rivers aplenty, and architecture found nowhere else in the known world. It was a wooden city sprung out of thin air by the founder of Konohagakure, the Shodaime Hokage. Hashirama Senju had not only created a city that sprawled with enough space for so many of the founding clans, but also utilized space in the upward dimension, revolutionizing the architecture of every city as they knew it. Kumogakure, Amigakure, Tsukikigure, all of the major shinobi cities now emulated Konoha. Hoseki City, the center of political power for Fire Country, was only now catching on to Hashirama's genius. Now being the last 50 years. Instead of impossibly strong wooden buildings, Hoseki City used steel and concrete, relatively new, to build vertically as well as spread like weeds in every direction. The walls were perhaps 30 feet high, 20 foot thick, and almost 100 miles in a sprawling circle, and the claim was that it had never been breached by a foreign army. The walls sparkled white in the sun, a dazzling feature that was surely intentional given the rolling hills surrounding the jewel of Fire Country were empty of trees for 20 miles. Some said you could see Hoseki sparkling from 100 miles away. The capital city of Fire Country was certainly massive enough, home to more than 10 million people. Hard to believe that many people existed at all, let alone in one place. Hard to believe that many people live here all squished together. Despite that, Hade was proud of his country and he could hardly criticize the cramped quarters given that Konohagakure had almost as many people, if not concentrated all in the city proper. Villages had sprung up like fleas on the back of a dog, all centered around Konohagakure proper. Here, it was much the same. The walls loomed on either side of him now, guarded by a small legion of men in orange breastplates and garbed with the insignia of the Fire Daimyo. 2 crossed swords against a fiery background with some type of eagle bird thing proudly prominent. A phoenix, I think. If he recalled correctly, it was a mythical fire-aligned bird with rejuvenating properties who embarrassed and stymied the Shinigami on a regular basis in the stories. Suitably arrogant lineage for a daimyo to claim. Hade nodded to the captain and streamed into the city alongside the mass of normal traffic. For his task today, he simply wanted to find lodging before mapping out his next move. Luckily for him, the original architects of Hoseki City made the city unnecessarily large, circular, and organized according to purpose, not time-built. Residential districts separated from commercial were separated from the military barracks. Hoseki was more a city-state than just a city, crisscrossed by canals. It even had its own industrial farms outside the city proper, though those, from what he'd heard, were newly built and didn't quite fit in with everything else here. The market district was a cacophony of noise and smells and sheer humanity, all bargaining and browsing and in each other's way. Hade did his best not to bump into anyone, maneuvering his weapon expertly too, as he kept walking through the tsunami of people. People of all shapes and sizes stuck out, aristocracy, the ruling elite dressed in silks and fur to account for the coldness of the admittedly mild winter, everyone else wearing some garish plain cotton version of what the elite was wearing. Fashion, not wealth, trickled down here. Hade did stick out, given that he was dressed like a Konoha shinobi, 2-handed sword hilt poking up over his shoulder, in sandals despite the temperature, his blue pants, shirt, and flak vest completing the look of a standard jonin. The only nod to his real position was that he still had his mask on, as that was his ticket into places shinobi were normally not allowed access to, a daimyo's palace, for instance. Here, he was the blade of the Hokage, and that symbol on his mask was his signature. though his authority stopped well short of the daimyo, or ordering around the guardians. Eyes open, scanning for what he knew Naruto looked like, though not really hoping for any kind of success, he wove his way through the city, periodically checking for pursuit. His aim was an inn he frequented during his Tokubetsu days called the Howling Dog. Though, he never actually stayed there. He periodically received information from the proprietor, Gerald, who was an enormous ex-shinobi who made it to Genin before realizing he wanted nothing to do with killing people and everything to do with delicious food. One could be forgiven for thinking he was an Akimichi. He wasn't. He was an honest man and an even better friend. 2 rights and a left past Shanjin Canal saw him in a somewhat clean street named Rose Avenue, though it had exactly 0 roses, nor did it smell as if it had ever had roses present. And the swinging sign over the massive door in front of a 5-story building of stone and glass clearly showed what was supposed to be a dog or a wolf of some sort with its oversized testicles prominently trapped in a fence, howling for all it was worth, little wavy lines coming off it to represent the no doubt atrocious sound. The Howling Dog. This was the name of his inn. Oh. For the love of... Hade gaped at it. Are you joking? What in the 7 pits of Yomi is this kami-forsaken place? What was Gerald thinking? People paid to eat and sleep here? Hade had never actually been to the Howling Dog, and he was starting to think maybe he should go find another reputable inn, good friend or no. Standing there, watching people pass by, he counted 7 rather rough-and-tumble workers stumbling out of the inn. It looked bright, warm, and quite a lot of fun for a rougher sort of crowd. Perfect for a high-ranking shinobi to find shelter from prying eyes. He could name a dozen of his fellow jonin who would have spent every waking moment not running mission cooped up in this place with a warm mug of ale. Hade checked the position of the sun. Barely past noon. It was a struggle not to roll his eyes. He let out a sigh. Hade was glad he'd never be able to tell Yugao this story, given that where he was and what he was doing was classified. She'd be so disappointed. But Hade shrugged and shoved his way into the Howling Dog and let the raucous music and conversation roll over him like a wave. The place was spacious and warm and best of all, clean. Not always the case with places like this. The jonin waded through the serving girls and general chaos of men and women letting off steam to the enormous man subtly watching him from the shadows of the back stairs. Hade took his mask off and attached it to his belt. The suspicious looks melted into a grin. Gerald's welcoming smile was wall-to-wall. They hugged when Hade made it into the alcove. Been a long time, Hade. 'Bout damn time you came to the Howling Dog. Best inn and food in the city. Gerald frowned at him, then smiled. Not coughing, I see. You look damn good, Gecko, you stuck-up bastard. An enormous hand thumped him on the back. A couple of years ago, that would have set him to a coughing seizure fit to launch his lungs out of his body. Hade couldn't help but grin back at that. The other comment, being called stuck-up, for having a moral compass, was rich. There are some perks to the greatest medical ninja in the world putting down roots again in Konohagakure, Gerald. The Hokage practically ordered Tsunade to have me as a priority patient. Gerald frowned. Hade rolled his eyes. Lady Mikoto is one of the greatest people I know. Please don't believe the rumors. He lowered his voice. They were still in a public place, despite the relative safety of being in Hoseki. I know her now. I've been her bodyguard for, 2 years now. Gerald, she wants those traitors dead more than most. I'd even say more than anyone. She's got a will of fire that burns stronger than even old Sarutobi. Hade shivered, peering into a distance at something only he could see. Something that frightened him, perhaps? Gerald noticed and said nothing. The fat innkeeper rubbed his chins, face smoothing. I've never known you to exaggerate. The exact opposite, in fact, so I'll take you at your word. But we can catch up later and talk a bit more. What brings you here? In person, no less? Business? A quick look around first, then he mobilized his chakra into fine strands. Spreading his hands like he was playing cat's cradle with silk webs, Hade spun a genjutsu finer than the finest thread, chakra humming quietly in his chakra coils. A portrait that looked like a master artisan had sculpted Naruto out of clay and rose up in between his fingers for Gerald, but no one else to see. Fine features of a young man with shaggy blonde hair, violet eyes like the purple-dyed daimyo used for their clothing, complete with faint whisker marks and longer than normal canines. This looks a wild child and mischievous for sure. Trouble, or I'd eat my old boot. Good or bad trouble is the question. Hate thought about what he should tell Geralt. Definitely not the truth, even though he didn't know the full story there, not really, but the orders were telling enough. Important was an understatement. This hunt was more important than anything else he'd ever done in his career, according to the Hokage. Geralt was an honest man, so he'd be as honest as he could. I'm looking to locate this child for the Hokage. He's a person of great interest to her, but I need someone smart, capable, and honest to do some digging. I know you have connections and you're always my first stop. Any information will be paid for triple normal commission. Geralt sounded like the dog on his sign. Triple? Hate nodded. Some interest indeed. Geralt was quiet, looking around the room. There was a large woman, stout with muscle, not fat, watching the serving girls work, a large spoon clutched in one hand. That spoon looked like it wasn't to be used for anything as pedestrian as stirring. Geralt nudged his head towards a dark hallway in the alcove that Hate hadn't seen at first. He followed Geralt through it into a library of sorts. Wall-to-wall shelving, a warm hearth, and lovingly used reading chairs made Hate instantly fall in love with it. He'd recently been meaning to finish the Travels of Daring Redmayne, and hadn't had the chance now that this mission had come up. Yuga was probably stealing his reading chair and his book both. Geralt continued speaking, obviously troubled, unaware of Hate's wildly off-track thoughts. Children who are alone would be stopped at the gates. There is zero chance he made it in here by himself, unless he went through the sewers, or swam in from the canal openings. Those are open air, run through most of the city, but the ferry boat operators, not to mention the regular patrols of peace officers and the royal guard, would have caught anyone coming in that way. Geralt melted into a large chair that seemed tailor-made for him, gesturing to a chair opposite him. Between them, off to the side, was an ornate stone table with worked black and white squares, pieces set up for a game of shogi. I say this to you to illustrate how difficult, almost impossible really, this task is going to be. The Department of Children's Welfare operates 7 state-run orphanages at the daimyo's command. His wife is a big proponent of money being spent to ensure none are on the streets. Any child who is found without a guardian or records of one in the DCW is fed into those 7 places. So Naruto could be in any one of those 7 places, that is, if he even came into this metropolis of almost 10 million people in a straightforward way. A needle in a haystack made of needles. Hate tried not to let the creeping frustration get to him, and with some effort, pushed it under and let his desire not to let down his leader subsume him. This was important. So what was his next step? There had been 0 tracks from anywhere around Sekiro City, and there really wouldn't be given the amount of snow coming down this time of year. So no real way to track anyone out of there on foot, let alone mounted. Naruto could be dead for all he knew, but he couldn't give up. The best thing to do was to assume that the kid headed for Konohagakure and was swept up into the system in Hoseki. Logically, he had to know how to navigate given who his guardian had been, and any would-be child in a city like Iron, even one not even tested yet, knew enough star navigation to make their way to Konohagakure using main roads. The path was almost a straight southward direction along highways and roads from Sekiro, to Hoseki, to Konoha. Could Naruto have gone around? No, that was unlikely given how little provisions he probably had. Living off the land was difficult for children with no practical experience, and experience was hard to have in a self-contained place like Iron Country. Underground, reliant on trade for all your needs. No, that was not a place they teach their kids to forage off the land. So it had to be Hoseki City. Making detours to other countries would be counterproductive, and his only real link to anyone outside Iron was Konoha itself. Geralt had waited while Hate thought through his options. Inevitably, the conclusion dawned that there were less savory options than state-run facilities. Is it possible he got snatched up or ran afoul of the Yakuza? Geralt frowned in consideration, wrinkles appearing like fine lines on his forehead. The Yakuza were a well-known and well-funded operation that ran amok through the aristocracy in Fire Country and abroad. The saying went that the daimyo, in any country, had two pillars of support, the people and the Yakuza Oyabun. Where one went, the other followed. The most famous Oyabun, or boss, in Fire Country was Tsukumagato, of the multi-billion Ryogato Corporation. Strange rumors abound about that man and what went on in his company. Unsavory things. I've heard some less than pleasant things about Shizumi Mansion and Shintoriku as well as Gato Corporation. It's hard not to hear things about the Gutter Master or the games he runs, and Gato is in everything from weapons to textiles. Patrons like to come in and discuss fights after big ones on weekends. I have no opposition to them just talking, mind you, and it gives me an ear to the ground that I don't mind having. As for Gato, Gerald heaved himself up and over to a sparsely stocked wet bar, pouring 2 thumbs worth of a brown liquid into 2 glasses. He held one out to Hate. Alcohol of any sort was quickly taken care of by a simple chakra exercise when a shinobi had one too many, so he accepted, sipping. Well, Gato Corporation is one company you can't touch, no matter who is sending you on this mission. Gato has the ear of the daimyo. The brown liquid burned like the oni going down his throat. He struggled not to show his unfamiliarity with the strong brew on his face. Gerald grinned at him like he knew already. Sometimes fights break out between supporters of gutter knives, Surayu, and of Towering Gnome, a legendary fighter from Old Lady Shell's and Tyrum Palace, Shin's main rival. Most of that sort of thing goes on over in the flower quarters. A rich man's game, some say. Shin is said to churn out the greatest fighters the world has ever seen. Hate couldn't help but roll his eyes. They weren't shinobi, so they couldn't be that great. The daimyo himself is said to be a fan of Surayu. This, of course, makes it problematic to outlaw the gutter fights. Gerald continued, swallowing his drink in one audible gulp. Shin takes children as young as 9, though very seldom. Hate frowned at Gerald, and the man held up his hands. Don't look at me like that. Does the Kaesame do much different? Don't be such a hypocrite. The Kanahigakura Shinobi Military Academy was different, but Hate struggled to articulate to himself why. There had been graduates as young as 11. That was a decision parents made, though, and most of the parents were shinobi and understood the life they were creating for their kids. The best shinobi were groomed young to become juggernauts of power by age 15. Hate himself graduated at 14, the average age. Shinobi and those like them, born with soaring amounts of chakra that were dangerous unless trained properly, had to be given to the Kaesame. That was that. Strange to hear an ex-shinobi arguing that point. Trained like caged animals to fight in some horrible ring for others' amusement, and one man's profit was very different than being a proud shinobi of the leaf trained by the Kaesame, Gerald. You know that. Gerald shrugged, swirling his drink. I left the ranks of leaf shinobi for more reasons than just that I wasn't good enough. Shinobi are tools, Hate. I say that with no disrespect to you. I'm no one's plaything. Hate stared at Gerald. He prayed to the Shinigami that Naruto wasn't in the very worst of places he could imagine. Hate would tear that place apart to reach Naruto if that was the case, but the best he could do, for now, was to search the easiest places first. The gutter, and all the gutter knives of the Yakuza underground, was not a place to go in hot unless absolutely necessary, especially if the daimyo was a patron of Shintoriku's. So the 7 orphanages were first on his list. I know that look. What look? That look that says you've made up your mind about something. Hate ignored Gerald again and stood up. Thanks, Gerald. You're a good man, but you always struggled to understand the larger picture of shinobi affairs. Lady Uchiha is a very different Hokage than Sarutobi or Tobirama. Minato understood, and so did Hashirama. A tool with a grand purpose might be a tool, but the outcome is worth any expense. Gerald stifled a startled laugh. I always did think you were too naive to make Jonin properly or survive past 30. But somehow. Gerald gestured with one enormous hand. You made it. Hate fingered his sword absently. The Hokage saw in me what I saw in her. Like recognizes like. And what, pray tell, is that? Hate bowed to Gerald, sliding his drink across the table and moving the white piece and go forward one diagonal move, smiling faintly. The best way to beat a system that always cheats is to stop playing the game. Hate straightened up from his formal bow. Thanks for everything, Geralt. I'll take your best room. My best room? When did you become a high roller? When I started working for the Hokage. Hate grinned. He had a lot of work to do and not a lot of time to do it. Time may have been running out for both him and the boy. Stay safe, Naruto. / the gutter, Shizumi Mansion. / Hoseki City. / Land of Fire. Naruto. Rolling his wrists and turning his body with the momentum, Naruto spun both blades in a tight whirling rotation of slashes, rounded blocks, and choreographed death. His opponent, the next ranked trainee above him, had only one advantage that Naruto knew of: free use of chakra to blast past him in speed and strength. Normally a colossal difference, the gulf between gods and men, and yet the question remained whether that would be enough to net him his goal, Naruto's death. The Uzumaki's very life, and that of Kazan's, was now on the line. The last 2 weeks of training had seen Naruto lose a lot. Dozens of opponents triumphed easily, overpowering him through sheer strength and speed, while Tanaka watched stone-faced. Naruto knew it was merely a matter of time before he disappeared given his terrible underperformance. Chakra usage had been introduced to all training, and it was a bomb amongst the rankings. His hope lay in an unexpectedly two-sided conversation with Kazan that had borne some fruit, and today was the day he'd find out if he could move up just one slot with this addition to his arsenal, hopefully granting him and Kazan some measure of safety. Forced, due to the unnecessary sling on his sword arm a few weeks ago, Naruto had become proficient enough with a sword in his other hand that using a long sword in either hand felt natural. Felt right. The first time he'd used 2 swords, he'd doubled the length of time he survived against stronger opponents than the one he was about to face. He hadn't won against Torin, or Ears, or the other trainees, but it hadn't been because of a lack of skill. Everything he'd been taught by Mifune, Yujimba, and Taza clicked, all the lectures about Kenjutsu, about theories of blocks and ripostes, of Zen and of battle tactics reserved for the incredibly quick style of Iajutsu the samurai lived and breathed, flowed into his own special blend of dual-bladed Kenjutsu that fit him like a glove. Constant pressure applied to an opponent through measured use of many blades equaled success. Well, relative success. Skill only counted for so much when someone was almost a blur to your eye in a reinforcement technique and struck with supernatural strength. Blows that he might have blocked before, now Naruto needed to gently redirect all that energy in deflection, and if he failed to do so perfectly, his wrist would snap like a twig. Naruto became very, very good at 2 things: redirection of blows and healing from things he shouldn't. Despite that, Naruto might as well be a baby battling a giant against Ears, let alone Torin. He practiced for hours at night, while everyone else slept. He went without sleep and woke up even earlier than the others to spend time in the arena with weighted blades, not the light practice ones. Naruto had been startled when Tanaka showed up at the crack of dawn the next day after he did this. He'd almost stumbled and dropped his blades. He did his best to block out anything except the imaginary opponents he sped through. Neck, heart, liver, kidney, head. Dozens of imaginary dead opponents piled on top of each other as he spun himself, and the blades through nimble hands and into attack patterns designed to fight against groups. 2 blades, working independently and together to block and attack, was an amazing feeling of power. Naruto laughed, remembering, as he moved in a moving cage of blurred wooden practice weapons. A small crowd was gathering, trainees and trainers alike. Torin, first among them, along with Ears and his small, but getting larger, crew of hanger-ons. None of them liked Naruto for the simple fact that he was categorically better than all of them, and they knew it, Ears as well, but their claim was that he refused to, in their minds, use chakra to even the odds on them. Like it was a deliberate choice to deny himself the advantage of extra strength and speed. It was a stubborn refusal to use an advantage that enraged them, lent them extra viciousness that Torin and Tanaka didn't stop. In fact, after a week of constant, unpunished beatings by Ears and the other trainees, Tanaka started encouraging them. Naruto couldn't prove it, and really what would he do if he could prove it? But his body was now always healing, always had welts in various color stages from the practice weapons. A kaleidoscope born of a refusal to bend. Today, he was going to even the ground just a little bit by giving the lowest among them a taste of their own medicine. Not ears, like he really wanted, but an equally smug opponent. The blades whirred to a stop, pointing at his opponent, a sneering boy that was a head taller than Naruto and resembled nothing more than a dirty, stinking ferret, beady eyes, lanky, rat face paced back and forth like his hero. It was the same boy that Naruto had questioned when he had first arrived 3 months ago. The boy who practically worshipped the ground. Tanaka the lion walked on. Ratface stepped close, hissing, "I don't know what you said to Yoruichi to make him leave you alone, but I don't care. I'm gonna kill you here and now, in front of the lion himself." Ratface spit and the brown glob hit the dirt in front of where Naruto stood. "Then I'm gonna take that big ol' retard you friends with and I'ma fuck him too, like I bet you do. Why else would y'all let him hang around? Besides, everybody knows you two is lonely all there in your rooms by yourselves." Naruto felt the rage surge, like tidal patterns in the ocean, slamming against the banks of his self-control. Who did this kid think he was? Torin stepped up to where the two boys were staring each other down. Naruto whispered, but it carried far enough. "You aren't leaving this ring alive." Ratface stared daggers. Both of them stepped up and Ratface's single long knife crossed Naruto's twin weapons. His heartbeat swelled in his ears, beat, beat, beat. Naruto didn't hear the words spoken to start the bout as the blood pounded in his skull because Ratface was fast and eager with that oversized dagger. Naruto ducked into a crouch, the first straight jab of that dagger blurring but obvious, and swayed aside, swords down at his sides, waiting. There was a pattern to most fighters. One simply had to watch and wait, which is what Naruto was doing as he continued to sway, by a hair each time, aside from vicious stabbing and swiping. Naruto felt one narrow miss as the dagger sheared through some of his hair, as he tilted his head to the side to avoid the sharp point. The blonde had been given wooden practice weapons, but Ratface obviously had bare steel. More incentives? The rage slammed at him to gut this worthless piece of shit who dared challenge them. But Naruto knew, as his heart rate rose and his breaths became closer together, that he would have only one shot at this. Avoiding blows was easy when his weapons weren't entangled in overt blocks. Despite how much faster the kid was and the telltale subtle field chakra was hard to miss up close, this fight was fairly even. Tanaka was staring, not at Ratface, but at Naruto. Torin looked like he ate something that disagreed with him. Naruto noticed that look from Tanaka, in between his weaving. Impressing Tanaka, as much as was even possible, was ultimately the goal with this bout. That would give him leeway to figure out the next solution to more difficult opponents. Duck, spin, dodge, Ratface sped up. Naruto started narrowly chopping his blades in short blocks. Ratface's arms were pistons as he started mixing up the dagger work with heavy clenched fist blows that were starting to get closer and closer to connecting as Naruto strained himself to anticipate and avoid blows without committing to directly opposing his enemy's strength. He needed to do something, or else risk leaving here having not accomplished his goal of proving he had more to give, despite his handicap that they still didn't know about. This couldn't end with people believing this was an even fight that Naruto happened to win. Naruto stopped backpedaling and went on the offensive. Both blades, wooden though they were, slammed into the knife blade and wrist of his opponent, sending the blade flying and Ratface cradling his wrist. Chakra would have reinforced the hand. It likely wasn't broken, but it still had to have hurt. Ratface lunged into a fully outstretched dive towards his weapon that saw him coming up in a spin, dagger at the ready. Naruto let him have it, and didn't press his advantage, waiting for Ratface to come back to him, wary now. Naruto had hesitated and realized that was a mistake. Hit first and keep hitting until they're down, Yajimbra had said. He'd missed that opportunity here. Naruto absolutely did not expect the quickness with which Ratface came at him. The boy was pissed, and it showed in the cold lines of anger in his face and the sudden steadiness of hand behind the razor-edged knife. The dagger spun in mesmerizing lines through Ratface's hands. Naruto was suddenly reminded he shouldn't be playing with this kid. He'd been training just like Naruto, if not quite as hard. Everything happened so quickly. Rat-Face ducked a strike and grabbed Naruto's arm with one hand, directing his swords away from him. One blinding jab nailed the meat of his bicep, blood sprayed spinning him, a line of hot pain spreading, crisscrossing his body now. 3 more cuts, vertical across his left breast, 2 flashing slices that mirrored themselves on each of his open thighs. A dozen cuts, small but deep, started to open up as Rat-Face sped up, obviously drawing deep on his well of chakra. The Uzumaki staggered, bleeding, huge slashes in his clothing, the vest torn, holes showing in his baggy gray pants, his bare skin covered in a patchwork of gashes and a veil of blood. Naruto didn't have a chance to blink, or wonder how serious the wounds were, before the onslaught was over and a knife was speeding at his throat. Both swords came up, crossing in a scissoring motion that sent the dagger and fist gripping it in a skyward movement. The momentum carried Rat-Face in close. Pain, though Naruto was getting very used to pain, made him sluggish, thankfully, not sluggish enough to miss an opportunity though. Dropping the left blade and holding the knife captive with only the right one, he used his free hand to brace himself against Rat-Face's neck while Naruto's knee crashed into the boy's stomach in a hoof of explosive air, blood spraying out of Rat-Face's mouth. Naruto held the dagger still, trapping as he spun past, kicking out with his back leg in a textbook back kick that made Rat-Face let go of the remaining knife and fly onto his back, sending up a cloud of fine dirt. Judging by the way Rat-Face levered himself up, flipping himself from his back to his feet in one smooth motion, the fight wasn't exactly over. The odds were still in Rat-Face's favor. One wrong move, one wrong piece of footwork, and the game was over. Naruto had a sneaking suspicion he couldn't heal fast enough to outpace severe blood loss or a missing head. He needed a decisive plan to overcome the protection chakra offered and fast. Nothing registered outside of the ring and the pinched features of the boy opposite him. Not the jeers, not the blood trickling down his legs and arms and chest, not the sweat pouring down his forehead, or the heat pouring off his body. Just him and his opponent. Life and death on the edge of a blade, just like Tanaka said it would be. Stop. The one word brought everything: cheering, insults, exchanging of real, whispered consultations of potential winners, to a grinding halt. Tanaka was whispering to Torin. Torin nodded and moved towards Rat-Face. Tanaka moved towards Naruto, and he watched him coming with a vague kind of dread. This hasn't happened before, not in bouts for exhibition ranking. Tanaka never attended these informal bouts, let alone stopping them to alter them in any real way. Torin let them beat each other to a very specific point beyond which the Irionen would need to heal them. Tanaka walked right past Naruto, stopping at the racks of weapons against the wall. Steel weapons. When he turned back to Naruto, whose breathing had evened somewhat, he had 2 mirrored steel longswords, slightly curved and heavier on one side. Naruto straightened, for some reason not wanting to show Tanaka how much he wanted to collapse, and held out the 2 wooden blades. Tanaka took them and slapped both leather-wrapped hilts of the real weapons into his palms, noticeably heavier than the wooden weapons. Naruto nodded and something that made him uncomfortable, passed between them. Permission, maybe? Expectation? His hand tightened on the hilts, and he turned to watch Rat-Face square himself up, across from him speaking to Torin, in a crouch that resembled some skittering creature of the night. Naruto launched into a warm-up combination, swords mirror-bright blurs, blocking and stabbing independently. Talking resumed around them, quiet this time, almost breathless. Torin moved away and so did Tanaka. Rat-Face sprinted at him, and it caught Naruto flat-footed even though he was waiting for an aggressive opening move. The boy now had 2 knives that resembled nothing so much as short swords, rather than the smaller dagger he previously held. Ducking the first lightning-quick slashes, Naruto rolled his wrists, deflecting the second knife that scored a line across the steel of his right weapon, his left criss-crossing and stabbing in riposte. He had to abort the whole movement because suddenly the weapons had disengaged and were darting at his thigh, where the artery lay under his skin. That would be a horrible way to go. Both his swords blocked, knuckles white with strain against Rat-Face's strength. Naruto, footwork locked in step with Rat-Face, heaved and shoved his shoulder against the other boy, knocking him off balance. The only advantage, if it could really be called that, was knowing that if he gave this kid space, he was going to be torn apart by the gulf in speed. Shifting his feet and moving parallel to the boy's back, Naruto tangled his weapons with his opponents to gain leverage and used his hip and arm to throw the boy. Naruto followed in an instant, sustaining several slashes to his arms despite his precautions. Rat Face rolled as Naruto stabbed downward, knowing if he didn't, he was dead. Rat Face got back up into a fighting stance with a rolling back handspring. I'm dead unless I do something. This fight is dragging out longer than I wanted, and now it's showing my weakness more than his strength. I have steel. So let's end this. Naruto lunged, blades leading, a snarl on his lips. The rage had him firmly in its grip. Naruto hammered his blades over and over on Rat Face. The boy was suddenly on the back foot, snarl forgotten and desperation beginning to take hold as he blocked and parried for all he was worth. Nothing was going to stop him killing Rat Face and securing him and Kaz's safety. Nothing. Chink. 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 Left and right blades came fast and furious, deflected by a hair each time, knives working overtime to keep Naruto's longer reach away from him. Rat Face batted away one blade and Naruto went over balance, pushed past the boy opposite him, exposing his back to the murderous teenager. Bright, hot fire entered his lower back as Rat Face took advantage of the mistake to punish it severely, 10 inches of steel burrowing into something important. Faint weakness pulsed through his body and his arm went numb. Naruto ignored the blade buried in his back, the weakness too, and whipped around so fast he pulled the knife sticking out of his body out of his opponent's hands, tearing something in his back and neck from whiplash. Rat Face had time enough to look concerned before Naruto's 3-foot-long blade carved a jagged furrow in a now thoroughly surprised Rat Face's throat. Naruto watched, almost in slow motion as the skin and muscle over his esophagus parted like a jacket unzipping. A thick chunk of viscera blew out the side of his opponent's neck. He followed the first blade with the second, tearing open the stomach lining and dropping organs out, flooding onto the sandy arena floor like a broken piggy bank spills money. Satisfaction competing with rage for dominance. Naruto's fellow trainee, eyes glazed in death, looked terrified. Every inch of this place was a struggle for survival, of one more day earned for life. Kazan was depending on him. Revenge for the dead depended on him, and only him. The sheer unfairness of his life, the absurdity of the situation taking his breath away, sparking a snarl, and Naruto felt his face contort with hatred for Rat Face, for Tanaka, for Orochimaru, for the man in red. Naruto could picture his horrible face. Hands moving on their own, he spun again, right hand sword and left taking the boy's head in different levels, brains, bone, and even more blood blasting in all directions. This fight was more than over. Naruto plunged the blades into the corpse and left them there quivering. Judging from the absolute silence, the outcome had been unexpected. To Naruto, there had been no other acceptable end. Tanaka simply nodded, as if he'd expected it all along, and left through the largest of the exit doors to the gutter floor. Torin was hard to read as he simply stared at Naruto like he'd never seen him before in his life. Ears, or Yurichi rather, oddly enough, had the same look on his face that he'd seen on Tanaka's. Taking stock of his wounds, Naruto absent-mindedly realized the knife was still sticking out of his back. He grabbed and yanked, doing his best to ignore the tearing sensation and the fresh wave of dizziness that made him list sideways until he stuck a hand out and braced himself against the nearest wall to keep himself from collapsing. Weakness wasn't a good look, especially not now. Only now did he realize the audience had started to filter away. They gave him a wide berth, even the trainers. Naruto had made exactly 0 friends. Today removed that possibility completely. Everyone was hyper-aware of the life and death nature of their training. Tanaka handpicked the final group and there were no guarantees about what he was really looking for. Yet, skill was the greatest factor, along with a certain flair or flashiness. Naruto had given some flash tonight, taking that blow and exhibiting a level of viciousness that thus far he hadn't displayed, minus that one incident with ears. Kazan was involved in that. Economical efficiency was best, most times. Yet sometimes a statement needed to be made. That was a lesson he'd learned recently. He was just sorry it had taken him this long to absorb the lesson the butchery in iron had given him. Enemies deserved no quarter. You fought and never gave in until one or both of you were dead. To do otherwise was to surrender what you believed in to the dominance of another. Kurama hadn't surrendered, despite his quiet admission of the Seifuku-sha's strength. Naruto hadn't surrendered when confronted with Orochimaru or that A and B that should have killed him. No, he'd learned this lesson. He'd never back down, not ever. For all his crazy, rat face had done the same thing. Naruto had just been better, had worked harder, been more skilled. That was that, the knife's edge that Tanaka spoke of and drilled them to focus on. Despite his win tonight, that mental awareness of his position in the pack was all too clear. Ratface was ranked higher than he was, now he was dead. That left Naruto in the exact same position. Ratface had been 8th out of 9 trainees left, some from other batches still competing for rank, which sucked for them. But Naruto knew he wasn't safe and neither was Kazan. He still needed that edge. This fight was too close, even with him being significantly more skilled than Ratface and with longer weapons. The reach didn't do enough to narrow the gap between speed, strength, and skill. He would die if he faced anyone more skilled than Ratface. All of the other contenders were better by far technically. The dual blades would even things somewhat, and animalistic aggression would get him far, but not far enough. Naruto started walking, dropping his hand from the wall. Already he felt a bit better, a bit less completely fucked up, his cut scabbing, but his body was exhausted spiritually. Chakra still did its job inside his body, but it couldn't heal mental exhaustion. Focusing was difficult now, but he pulled himself towards the sanctuary of his room with Kazan. Somehow, someway, he still needed that edge. Tanaka caught him in the hall as he left, a ghost passing through him leaving him cold, speaking in a low whisper that he heard perfectly. Stop fucking around, Naruto. We both know you more to give, but if you show anyone a performance like that again and I'll kill you and your stupid friend both myself. I don't like wasting my time. Then he was gone again, ghosting away. Torin was eyeing him and speaking to ears at the end of the hall. They both turned and walked away as Naruto gave them his back. Great. Just fucking great. The stakes just got higher. Idly, Naruto lay on his sleeping bag over his dirty mattress and one finger followed the fine tracery of scars, newly minted over the last few months, that wound its way across his body, arms and chest mostly. He'd added some deep ones during his match with Ratface, whom he'd found out later was named Tomaz, no last name, an orphan most likely, a name that definitely had the sound of Fire Country to it. Naruto didn't even know why he'd bothered to learn the name anyway. From the little he'd been able to glean from casual conversations with the other trainees, and those were few and far between as they made no bone about showing how much they disliked him, most of them had come to be here from some guy in the government. They thought they were going to a state home and then, poof, they were here. Still others came of their own volition, families making a choice to have one child go into the gutter in the hopes of becoming a champion and earning enough money to send back to their families. Desperation, as Naruto was finding, made impossible merely a long shot. Kazan was snoring, no surprise there, slumped over his artwork. Some bizarre abstract human with horns and 3 eyes and bizarre titanic creatures in the background that were fuzzy. Who knew what ran through Kazan's head? Every minute of every day was him, circling the chakra problem like a caged lion. Even now, he couldn't stop turning it over like a worry stone, thoughts worn smooth. The irony burned. Naruto had been praised over and over for his seemingly bottomless ocean of chakra, by Master Aoran, by Yajimbra when doing his reinforcement exercises, by Taza in control practice, and even random censor samurai who could apparently feel him coming a mile away just by how unbelievably strong his chakra had been. Now he had, not nothing, but less than nothing. The sun had been at his fingertips, warming him, and now he couldn't feel the warmth, despite seeing how beautiful it was. The chakra didn't flow so much as it crashed inside him, not constrained by chakra pathways, but free-flowing, spilling into every part of him. He could, with a lot of focus, make some of it move in a certain direction, but it was akin to shoving a boulder. He could see slight movement, but it always came back to rest. There was exactly no one here he could talk to about his problems. In a flash, he dared to hope. the Irionin. She consented to heal various people. Would she speak with him about chakra? Eniyashiro had spoken about how medical-trained ninja were able to convert their chakra internally into that special healing-natured form of chakra they used that produced that green glow. Perhaps she would know something, be willing to show him, if not everything, at least enough he could puzzle things out. Naruto sat up. He had very little left to lose. Anybody could challenge him in the coming days, and he had to win, and win decisively to keep his spot. There would be no more scraping by. Just then, a knock sounded at the door before a trainer stuck their head in. This one was sandy-haired, with a long crooked nose that spoke of fight experience, broken, and more than once. On your feet and to the hall. Tanaka has an announcement. Naruto made to wake Kaz, but the man waved him away. Your friend can stay here, this doesn't concern him. The 2-minute walk was done in silence. The hall, as pretty much everyone called it, was the same place he'd been when he first saw Tanaka speak. 1/3 cafeteria, 1/3 auditorium, 1/3 lounge area. The hall resembled nothing more than a massive open room filled with tables and chairs, with the food dispensary taking up the entirety of the left wall as you entered. The opposite wall from where you entered through 2 large double doors was a built-in stage with a low-raised podium. Tanaka and several other folks, including Gutter Master Toriku, conferred. This is new, and new is bad. New is hard to predict. Several of the trainees already clustered in groups around the tables nearest the stage. Ears was quietly conferring with a few of the other brown-nosing hanger-ons, the ones that outright insulted him, or spit on him, or attempted to trip him before he broke a few of their noses, and they stopped. Well, they stopped the rough stuff. Nothing could stop those looks that felt like a physical thing on his back, or in this case, his front. He took a seat to the right of the stage in a chair that had one leg of the 4 wobbling. How annoying. Just my luck. Naruto threw his legs up onto the table and leaned back, praying this would be quick and it would be some administrative paperwork-related mumbo-jumbo. There was a yawning chasm in his stomach that was widening as he sat, anxiety making his palms sweaty. Naruto didn't have to wait long. Master Shin took the podium. Arena Master Tanaka has assured me that you are all doing your very best to become the next generation of my legendary gutter knives. I know he is a hard man to please, and the fact he says anything to me about how promising you all are is telling enough. A brief smile turned the enigmatic man's lips up. Did his eyes flicker to Naruto? Nah, imagination. He was on edge still, after all. That being said, I'm excited to announce that our official season starts soon and the gutter circuit will be open to both ranked matches and exhibition matches. Other gutters are getting ready, with their rosters of both trainees and fights. Yet mine was selected by the council to host the season opener. Here he paused, looking around the room. Naruto would have assumed the man was mildly pleased with this turn of events, but even the normal smile was like shouting with joy for anyone else. The reason I've gathered you all here was to inform you all that the Grand Oibun Sakumagato, a very esteemed patron of mine, is set to arrive tomorrow and includes a representative from the new government of the Hidden Mist Village, several diplomats, and his son, a distinguished fighter in and of himself, Liano Gato. There was a low hum of talking in response to this. Naturally, everyone was curious what any of this had to do with them, and Naruto shared this anxiety. But it was the knowledge that a Hidden Mist delegation was arriving here, where Naruto was trapped, that set his heart racing and dread gripping his heart like a vice. He knew Hidden Mist had become a puppet for the Seifuku-sha. A Mist Anbu had tried to murder him in his sleep, had butchered the people he loved and piled their body parts in a heap outside his house, just because. They'd do horrible things for no reason at all, it seemed. Hidden Mist wasn't done with him, and he felt, in his heart, that if that representative recognized him, Tanaka and Master Shin wouldn't let something as small as a potential gutter knife's profit stop them from carving him up, and Kazan for that matter, to please this Gato person. His problems just went from kind of urgent life and death to almost certain imminent dismemberment and death. Escape was now priority number 1. He almost didn't catch the rest of what Master Shin was saying. As all of you will be expected to participate in the exhibition matches for the season opener, any trainee who does not perform to his or her full potential therein will be dealt with accordingly. We have no room in this program for visible non-starters. Is that clear? Chorused agreements met that cold statement, so Master Shin went on, more warmly, if you could call glacial melt warm. Perception of strength is almost as important in the grand scheme of things as actual strength. Therefore, these matches, meant to show the future strength of this gutter, are of the utmost importance. Again, do you all understand? Another chorus of agreement. I trust Arena Master Tanaka will ensure our opening season preparations will be smooth and without issue. Tanaka nodded. Torin bowed and left the room at a whispered word from the lion. Memories flashed through Naruto's head of that day, and he flinched when Tanaka barked a dismissal. Those kept cropping up, distracting him. When did memory fade? When could he get those images out of his head? I don't sweat this much during fights. It was an effort just to practice his breathing to calm down. What the fuck is wrong with me? He knew it was the missed announcement. That had him all kinds of fucked up. Naruto fairly sprinted back to his room. Kazan was up and drawing. He knew some fuinjutsu that would seal a room against listening. The proper symbologies, imbued with chakra, would prevent sound waves from leaving the bounded field created by the fuin. But Naruto couldn't use his chakra, and Kazan didn't have enough to do much of anything, let alone power a bounded field. So whispering would have to do. His voice wavered. Get it together. Kaz. The goofy-looking behemoth barely even acknowledged he was in the room. Naruto smacked the back of his head. Kaz barely flinched, but finally looked around seemingly confused, which faded when he saw Naruto. Listen up. There is some big stuff going down in the next couple days. Kazan drew attention wherever he went on account of his absolutely enormous frame. How would they even escape together? Naruto couldn't leave him, that was a given. Would Kazan even understand what was happening? His friend was surprisingly insightful and knowledgeable about things that were happening, but this was different. For all Naruto knew, these secrets had murdered Iron Country, and likely hidden Mist as well. There are people coming to this place that would kill me if they recognized me or knew I was here. I can't be here any longer, and neither can you if I'm not here. So we need to escape. Breathing deep, he said, do you understand? We can't stay here. Those startling green eyes were clear with none of the fogginess that sometimes happened on bad days. Kaz nodded. No kill Ruto. No kill me indeed, Naruto muttered. Who knew what they did with the kids who didn't make it? I have no desire to find out. Be ready to skedaddle. Kaz just looked confused. To leave here quickly. Kaz started to pack up. No, not now. When I say. That seemed to track. Good. Now Naruto just needed to figure out how the hell they were going to sneak out of a place crawling with deadly chakra-using fighters on a day that security was bound to be extremely tight on account of the important people, half the criminal underworld if rumor was to be believed, all converging on the one place Naruto absolutely could not be. Piece of cake. Naruto sighed and threw himself on the shitty mattress face first. It had absolutely no give and felt like concrete when he hit. Naruto briefly tried to suffocate himself. Death would at least be relaxing. His life felt, ever since that day, that it had been in freefall with him having absolutely no control over events. This was just the cherry on a piece of shit sundae. Escape. That was the goal. If anything, it threw his other objective, find a way to regain some functionality to his chakra, into stark relief. He couldn't fight his way out as he was, and stealth was less than an option with Kazan in tow. The guy couldn't sneak around if his goddamn life depended on it, and it very much would. Not only that, but he wouldn't lie for all the money in the world. Honest to a fault and straight as an arrow was Kazan. Any ideas would be a shaky limb he could grab onto for safety. What about the Irionin? How could he have forgotten? Now was a perfect time to go visit her, and hope against hope she had something he could use to fix himself. What a tiny branch in a big-ass hurricane I'm holding on to. He didn't really have any other options. Naruto got to his feet and briefly spoke to Kaz. He had a day, at most, to figure something out, and this was turning out to be another sleepless night in the making. One day and the butcher's bill would be due, one way or the other. He had no time to waste. Chapter 9. It stared back. There had been no way to see the Irionen without a half-dozen people around her. This rendezvous needed to be kept secret. Well, a secret from Tanaka and Torin at least, because the second they got wind of the fact Naruto was completely incapable of properly using his chakra, his life and Kazan's would be forfeit. So Naruto waited. And waited. And waited. And waited. After nearly 2.5 hours of loitering in a nearby hallway, close to the infirmary, Naruto had a panic attack when he realized he still had chores that were outstanding. If he didn't complete them, his jig was up anyway because people like Torin would come looking for him, and it would not be good when they found him. Beatings at best and at worst? Well, the worst right now would be to be under any type of surveillance whatsoever. He needed his freedom. Naruto abandoned his spot in the infirmary hallway, made his way to the kitchens in the hall, and spent another 3 hours of his day cleaning the huge kettles the cooks used, then proceeded on to chopping and stacking 8 cords of wood for the huge ovens. Naruto found he didn't mind the chores as busy work like the repetitive motions of chopping and stacking, cleaning, and scrubbing were incredibly relaxing. The crack of dawn kata workouts with the steel blades from the arenas were his favorite parts of his day. He'd never been able to do the type of sit-down, stare at a candle and hum bullshit that the samurai seemed to love. Samurai were a bunch of freaking weirdos. Yup. Scrub, scrub, scrub with an old wire-handled brush and chop, chop, chop with the lovingly sharpened long-handled axe. Stack, stack, and stack some more. Generally, Naruto had almost no concept of time inside the gutter given that there were a practically non-existent amount of windows, except for the cells, and those were more like doggy doors designed to give some semblance of hope of escape. That is, despite the fact, almost nobody here actually wanted to escape, which blew his mind more than once. The realization had been startling in several conversations. Avoiding the kids who were worshipful of Tanaka became a full-time job. Briefly, he visited Kazan in their room, eyes flickering to the tiny window where outside the world was dark. Kaz was observing some bugs and drawing them in the corner of the room near his art supplies. The boy didn't even look up, so Naruto left him to it, and went back to the infirmary, slinking his way through dark hallways. Anybody who caught him here would automatically, and rightly, assume he was up to no good. Naruto knocked on the door softly. No response. He knocked harder this time and heard mutters and doors opening and closing, footsteps coming closer inside the room. The door opened to frame the bent form of the Irionen, who looked even older up close than he'd thought. Wrinkled folds were carved into her like canyons, made by glacial water movement. Unreal. He'd thought Mifune was old, but this broad made him look like a spring chicken. He must have been gaping at her because she was frowning, though that might have just been her face, and beckoned him in with one flapping hand. The door shut firmly behind him and he had a swooping sensation in his stomach, a sudden feeling that maybe she wasn't as harmless as she seemed. Irionen meant Shinobi, or someone trained at the very least. Why that completely rational thought hadn't occurred to him before this was beyond him. Naruto had found, as he became unfortunately more self-aware, that he tended to think and believe what he wanted without suffering a thought for the details. Naruto swallowed. He wasn't prepared for the straight-up rude snap that came at him hard. She lacked her fingers together, and Naruto swallowed a scowl before it could form. She sounded like a bullfrog croaking. Well, what is it? Banging on my door like a wild rhesus, then barging in here like a bat out of Yomi with no regard to the time. Well, girl? Speak. This is not going well. Wait, girl? Naruto gaped at her. Trying to remind himself he needed what she knew was harder than he thought it'd be. Hands on hips, she stared at him like she expected him to cough up all his secrets, and be quick about it. This was an Irionen that clearly cared about money above all, or she wouldn't be working for a scumbag like Shintoraku. So her time was valuable. Best not to waste it. This was a terrible idea. Suddenly, he didn't know what the hell he was going to say. Hi, I had the king of Bijou in my stomach, and when a mad shinobi tried to take it out, I ripped it out on my own and crippled myself forever? I need help. Can I trust you? The words burst out of his mouth before he could call them back. They were a child's words, ill thought, and would make no sense to this woman. But they were out and he couldn't call them back. The old woman suddenly looked wary and she darted to the door, quicker than Naruto imagined she could, and opened it, peering both ways then shutting it tight, locking the top bolt with a clank of finality. She motioned to him with one hand as she tamped down on an oil lamp sitting next to her desk, plunging the room into semi-darkness. The room she'd led him into the first time was the infirmary, complete with a few beds and that sterile hospital feel with white walls, unexpected given the palace had been mostly constructed with sandstone, and the rest of the room had some random machines that Naruto couldn't place the purpose of station next to each bed. The old Irionin walked quickly into the next room, shutting lights off as she went, opening a door in a T-section hallway that led into what must have been her apartment. The decor was completely different, no sandstone, all wood paneling, and no white to speak of. The room looked fairly bare with some painted scenes of a desert at night of all things, and bizarrely, an anatomically correct full-sized wooden puppet sat on a workbench against the farthest wall. Faintly amused, he wondered why a grown woman would be playing with puppets of all things. Her hand slapped onto a Fuin mark against the wall and several others, spaced evenly along the walls, level with each other, lit up. Naruto hadn't made it out when it was dark, but now he could read it clear as day with symbologies identical to the ones he would have written into his cell walls: prevention against eavesdropping and a barrier of absolute silence. She could murder me in here and nobody would know. Naruto started and realized she was between him and the door. Stupid! She cut off anything he was about to say. You asked if you could trust me? I'm ensuring we can speak freely. I'm not about to murder you, idiot girl. Naruto rubbed the back of his head, getting more annoyed by the second. Though he wasn't sure who he was more annoyed with, this old woman or himself for overthinking this and going through with a stupid plan that had him reveal everything to a random stranger. This was not going to plan. He swallowed. But the next word she said figuratively blew his mind out the back of his head. I know you've had a bijou in you, girl, and I frankly don't care, if that's what you're worried about. I also happen to know he did a number on you coming out. She crossed to an L-shaped couch of some dark material that had a faint shine to it and sat, gesturing for him to sit across from her in a love seat. What I want to know, the Irionin rearranged her skirts, pinning him as he froze halfway down to the seat, is how you managed to survive. How the hell? Do you know how to speak, girl? Naruto cleared his throat. Why yes. How the hell did you dash? Know you had a bijou in you? That's simple. She waved the question away like it didn't matter. Naruto goggled. I've sealed my fair share of bijou into unsuspecting children. Leaves a mark, if you will. He found himself on his feet, white-hot anger coursing through him. This woman, she... Who the fuck are you? Those ancient eyes, clear and apathetic, pinned him like a bug on a collection board. Naruto didn't have his blades, but he'd killed this old woman with his bare hands if she made the wrong move. Naruto suspected he wouldn't get within 5 feet of her. The point was he wouldn't go down without a fight. Sit down. Hesitating, because what did he have to lose really? Without help he was dead. He needed to extend a little trust to get that help, and she already knew way more than he was comfortable with. And she sealed bijou into children? Who was this person? What had he done, thrown himself into the lion's jaws? So his secrets, some of them anyway, were out. Trust would either get him killed or save him here. So he sat. Frustration rose within him. This wasn't the way this was supposed to go. Roundabout questions followed by some super-secret important hint that would solve all his problems, not make new ones. I go by Lysenia here, but my real name is Chio, girl. She seemed to pause here, as if that had some significance. Naruto just stared at her, waiting. That girl comment was starting to piss him off. He was a boy. Never mind. All you need to know is that I'm looking for someone and this is temporary work while I investigate in the capital. I gave you my real name because it's leverage. Chio is a name that would spank the camel, so to speak, in Fire Country. Especially in Hoseki City. I'm extending the same trust to you, girl. Naruto shrugged, nonplussed. But this girl comment was pissing him off. Naruto stood up and threw an accusing finger at her. First off, how about you stop calling me girl because I'm a goddamn boy, you old fuck? Chio visibly struggled. Would you prefer I call you boy? Well, no. Then shut up. None of this made any goddamn sense. She was so annoying. Naruto's mouth shut with a click and he sat. At least she wasn't some patient saint. She could get annoyed and that meant she had levers to press. They sat, quiet, eyeing each other for a moment. Naruto tried very hard not to fidget. He failed. Why are you here? You asked if you could trust me? You can trust me further than that lot. She pointed out there vaguely as if to include everyone not in this room. She clarified after a beat as Naruto opened his mouth. Chio sounded drier than a desert. Not in the gutter, idiot boy, why are you here at my door? I'm not going to tell anybody your secret if that's what you're worried about. You don't worry about the two-step when a lion is on your tail, after all. What the hell is a two-step? Naruto ignored the metaphors that didn't make any sense and thought about what he'd say. Mifune was fond of saying, when you've committed to your strike, blank your thoughts. Hesitation kills as quickly as a blade to the throat. I can't use my chakra. I'm useless. Silence dropped like a bomb. Saying it out loud made it 1,000 times worse and his eyes prickled with unshed tears. For some reason he didn't want to cry in front of this woman. It was an effort to swallow and continue. Well, not useless, but pretty much. The stuff, the chakra, is all haywire inside me. It's painful to try to grab it and move it. I was hoping, well, the man who kidnapped me and sold me to Master Toriku was a medical ninja like you, and he said. Naruto shrugged uncomfortably. He said that there were medical jutsu and stuff that you didn't use hand seals for. You just kind of. Naruto wiggled his hands in a huge circle. Chio looked like she was trying not to laugh at him. He threw up his hands, suddenly pissed. This was serious. I dunno, he said there were ways I could get around the issue, maybe. I was hoping you'd. Chio put one finger to her wrinkled chin. This man. You say he was a medical ninja like me? Naruto nodded. Yeah, he saved me from drowning in a river, then he saw my problem and was intrigued. After he was done looking at me. Naruto gestured around him. If Naruto didn't know better, he'd say he'd angered Chio with something he'd said. She was muttering something he couldn't hear. Strung up by his toes. Disgusting. Huh? Chio shook herself. Nothing. May I look at you, boy? This was why he came after all. Some help would be better than none. He nodded. She moved towards him, though she made no hand seal that he could see. Instead he felt something move through him, like an extremely powerful lens was looking through him, to something deeper. Green light surrounded her hands, like earlier, but she was standing over him, not laying her hands on him like Anne had to in order to do the same, or what he thought was the same, jutsu. Hope surged up inside him as much as he tried to squash it. Chio seemed to know many things, perhaps one of those things would be the key to helping him. The puppet piece was weird though. Chio's light faded and she stared past him as if she couldn't see him. Her face was hard in the dim light of the oil-based lamps. Why didn't she have any of the new Fuin lamps? Those lamps, powered by chakra, lasted a very, very long time and were now fairly mainstream. The gutter had them strung across the ceiling of the arena in haphazard lines. But he was distracting himself from his nervousness. A stone was forming in his stomach. What would she find? I'm sorry, boy. The stone dropped and he hardened himself, killing the enthusiasm that he'd started with. Of course, it wouldn't be this easy. Should he just give up and accept the limitations he knew were stretching around him like an iron chain? Wrapping him up in a miserable, slow, short-lived destiny? He might as well be Kurama, trapped inside a seal that was made, not by chakra and symbologies, but by terrible, impossible choices. I can't fix you, but I do know of a terribly long and difficult road that may lead to some success. May. That hope was hard to snuff out as it came surging back. I'll do anything, Mistress Chio. Anything. Oh ho, Mistress, is it now? I'm no aristocrat. I'm a kunoichi. Knock that off, boy. Naruto's head almost fell off from how hard he shook it. She eyed him, dark eyes serious, and held a finger up, her words taking on a lecturing tone. Most of your tenketsu are now disconnected from your chakra paths. They are like arteries and veins that pump chakra from your coils, which, in point of fact, are thicker than any I've ever seen in my many, many years, thicker than many kage I've seen. But they are full of holes, shredded like cheese. Chio tapped her finger against her chin. That's probably the Biju's doing if I had to guess. They tend to dig themselves in, make themselves at home, the freeloaders. Chio shook herself. Anyway, those pathways connect to all parts of your body, and chakra control is defined as the ability to shuttle chakra in precise amounts where and when you need it to specific places or tenketsu. With me so far? Naruto nodded. What she was saying tracked with what he'd been taught already. Chakra has an ebb and a flow that needs to be mastered, a direction to the way it flows. As we're taught in the academy, hand seals were tools created by the sage as a sort of shortcut, or muscle memory designed to force a new shinobi to associate specific inward flows of chakra with the various hand seals, the direction. Her hands rolled slowly through what Naruto assumed were these hand seal things. Hands clasped, they intricately sped up, interlocking and separating, interlocking again in different ways. Naruto thought back to his home. Samurai never used hand seals for what was now obvious reasons. They couldn't use hand seals and a sword at the same time. So they made life harder in order to master chakra techniques that didn't need shortcuts. Idly, he thought about the fact that iron wasn't really his home anymore. It probably didn't exist. That thought almost crushed him under its weight. Rat, boar, bird. Yada yada. Chio flapped her hand idly. She liked doing that, Naruto noticed. The point of me telling a tiny boy like yourself this is that most don't understand that hand seals are a crutch that both new and old alike cling to. You don't need them. In fact, the best shinobi, the most skilled shinobi, train their techniques so much to the point that they do not need hand seals to guide the flow of chakra inside their body. Naruto struggled to process this, and Chio watched him, leaning back in her chair wincing. How the hell did they do it then? Just poof? Naruto waved his hands. Wait. So, they just wave their hands and magic happens? Chio leaned forward, eyes intense. What I'm saying, boy, is that right now you have zero chakra control. Your chakra floats all over your body with no direction, and it's painful to force it, but it is the mind that controls where chakra goes, paths or no paths, functioning tenketsu or no tenketsu. There are jutsu that create techniques inside the body. How do you think they do that? The thought hadn't even occurred to him, given his ignorance about most things chakra-related, that techniques could be formed inside the body. I guess I just assumed. Chio snorted, and he had the sudden urge to stick his tongue out at her. I assumed that was impossible. Chio sighed. Nothing is impossible with chakra, just improbable. She grew quieter, looking off into space. I've seen things done with chakra I wish I hadn't. She looked back at him, focusing. But I've also seen some beautiful things. Both impossible. Both completed before my eyes. So there are always two or more sides to everything. The Uzumaki got up from the extremely comfortable couch and started pacing. How could he use this information? She was plainly saying something, but he was still too new and didn't get what he was driving at. So you're saying that I need to practice moving my chakra around inside my body? But that's the incredibly painful part. Like, actually terrible. You ever just stabbed yourself for no reason? Yeah, that's what this feels like. And nothing ever happens. Chio snorted. Yes, because do you know any jutsu? No. Then why would you assume moving chakra does anything without a purpose? A purpose you need to give it? Frustration gave way inside him. This was important, useful even, but he needed something now to give him an edge. To help him save himself and Kazan. Listen, this is great info. But I don't think you quite understand. Then explain it to me, boy, because this isn't something you're just going to get over in a day. Shinobi spend lifetimes achieving a pure will-activated technique. A great many cannot even manage half-seals. What you're trying to do is skip to the end of a lifetime of training, like a newborn trying to compete in the 1,000-mile trial without learning to walk first. 1,000-mile trial? No. No, he wouldn't be distracted. What was a half-seal? Naruto shook his head. No, that was a direction that was useless to him right now. He needed actionable information that would help him now. He'd ask about the trial later. If there was a later. So, how does Fuinjutsu fit into it? I'm assuming it's like hand seals a shortcut? I can't do any of my Fuinjutsu without applying chakra to activate a seal, yes? Is there any way to get around that? Chio looked surprised for the first time. Who taught you that? What do you mean, who taught me that? That's basic stuff. I think you'll find that Fuinjutsu is an esoteric art to even the more learned shinobi you'll encounter. I know most villages are taking steps to combat the ignorance, given the amount of technology that uses Fuin now, but still, boy, that is unusual you know so much. Chio was looking at him consideringly. What's your rush? You have the rest of your miserable life here to figure things out, yes? Why not just relax a bit? Naruto knew this conversation was a tipping point. The Bijou knowledge was interesting, for most people, but not important anymore. He was nobody. A nothing. But tell her what, or rather who he'd escaped. That he was being sought by some very important people for reasons even he still didn't understand, given that he didn't contain the Bijou anymore? That was real trust. And that orb, that prison that went dark. Now the voice. Definitely no on that count. He couldn't trust anyone with that. But maybe a little more trust would give him something more, something that could help. She knew about Fuin, maybe that was the key, though he couldn't see how. Hidden Mist is going to be here tomorrow. She was slow in replying. Yes. Along with that mouth-breather Gato and his lumbering pervert of a son. What of it? Naruto sat back down. It was time to tell somebody. The Butcher of the Bloody Mist wants me for some reason. He's the reason the Bijou, you know, got yoinked. He's killed my family, and I'm fairly certain he's still chasing me. Chio looked truly stunned for the first time. In an instant, she was hauling him up by the front of his ratty shirt in one old, but ironclad grip. Naruto could smell the sour breath from her face, acidic and tangy smells of alcohol and cigarettes. Her eyes bored into his. Why would he want you if he has the Bijou? Naruto slumped in her grip. Well, first off, I'm not sure he does have the Bijou. Kurama put up a hell of a fight like the badass he is. She looked at him, confused, but still holding him. Naruto looked away. I have no idea. She shook him, hard enough to clack his teeth together in his head. I have no idea. I swear. I don't even know if the Ninetales is dead or sealed again, let alone why he wants me. She dropped him gently into his chair, seemingly deflated. Why do you care so much about the man in red, you old bat? It took a second, but she responded quietly. My grandson, he's the one I'm chasing. And? Naruto waited and waited. He works for the Seifuku-sha. Well, he works for someone who works for the Seifuku-sha. Or something like that. I'm not entirely certain. That's part of why I want to find him. The bottom dropped out of his stomach, and he scrambled away from her, desperate to get away. Oh shit! This was exactly the wrong person to confide in. Naruto was mentally kicking himself as he scrambled to the door and tried to get through it, not even seeing that it opened inward, which prevented him from leaving as he tugged on the handle. Calm down, boy, I'm not going to turn you in, I promised. Besides, I'm trying to kill my grandson, not you. She looked and sounded tired as he felt. Kill her grandson? Who is your grandson? It doesn't matter. The point is that you are important to the Seifuku-sha. That means I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he doesn't succeed. Wait. What? Okay. So you aren't going to kill me? You'll help me escape? She merely looked at him. Naruto was defensive. How the hell am I supposed to know? Don't be an idiot. I can tell you aren't. Well, that was good to know, and you'd be the first to think I'm not an idiot. Fine. Then can you answer my original question? About Fuinjutsu? Naruto stared at her. Very well, very well. Chiyo took on a lecturing tone again, gesturing absently for him to sit. I don't know a ton about this, but what I do know is this. Fuinjutsu is, at its core, the exact same thing as the hand seals or preparing a technique, only infinitely more advanced. Fuinjutsu activates with chakra, yes, but it executes the function you've given it. Follow? Naruto knew this but hadn't put two and two together. Fuinjutsu was like a prepared technique. The symbologies were what gave the technique shape, dimension, elemental type, and function. But it was time-consuming, difficult, and exacting, which is why nobody used it as a regular jutsu in battle. He suddenly saw exactly what she was getting at with this explanation, and pieces started to trickle into a picture of a solution in his head, a puzzle unraveling in his head. Excitement grew, despite his attempts at quashing them. So, what you're saying is that I could theoretically program a Fuinjutsu to draw chakra in for a purpose? To use my chakra without me having to, actually use it? Chiyo frowned. No, that's not what I was saying, because you didn't let me finish, but I suppose, no, that would be horribly painful, given what you've already described. Besides, you'd have to form the seal inside your body, and I frankly don't even know if that's possible. She trailed off, as if picturing something. But I suppose the idea would work. I've seen something similar. Chiyo looked like she was imagining her worst enemy. But you'd have to be a master of Fuinjutsu to create a whole new technique, and to form it inside your body with the precision required of Fuinjutsu. That has the potential to level a city, child, if you do something wrong with the amount of chakra you have swirling around inside you. You know this, yes? Naruto nodded, unable to keep the excitement off his face. You'd be willing to vaporize every man, woman, and child in Hoseki City on an experimental technique you don't even know enough to create safely? This gave him pause. Ashamedly, it was only a slight pause. She didn't have enough information about him to understand why he was probably the only one in the entire world left who could risk this type of experiment without fears of blowing himself and the whole city up. So he put on his least mischievous smile. Don't worry, Granny Chiyo, I'm the youngest Fuinjutsu master in the world. It was bullshit, but she didn't need to know that. For good measure, he threw two thumbs up at her and smiled. She frowned. That smile fills me with all kinds of horrible premonitions of being vaporized in my skivvies, boy. Do try to look less like such a rapscallion when you grin like that. Fewer teeth and more lips. Naruto ground his teeth, still smiling for all he was worth. While he still had no idea what he would do seal-wise, let alone have the actual skills to call himself a master of anything, he had a starting place. He just needed to think, then figure out the logistics. At the very least, Naruto knew enough to prevent him from blowing up half a city. They had a plan, he just needed a little inspiration. Chiyo sighed. I'll start working on preparations to leave. They won't question me, they wouldn't dare. But taking one of Shin's investments won't be easy. So relax and let me work. Don't come visiting again for any reason until I call for you, okay? Naruto nodded. Him and Kazan would escape and they would live another day. After that? He clenched his jaw so hard his teeth hurt. One thing at a time. Naruto slept a total of an hour and a half that night, consumed as he was on his new project. A paper hill next to the bed stood testament to that fact. None of the symbologies were clicking together properly to accomplish a total body enhancement similar to what chakra naturally did when using reinforcement techniques. He knew immediately as he wrote them whether they would gel together in functional linkage to produce that effect, and no luck. He did find one that would make him glow blue. Whatever the fuck use that would be except as a flashlight, he couldn't figure out. The closest analogy he could think of to what he was doing was attempting to brute force a lock with infinite digits by writing down each and every possible combination. He needed to narrow the field down somehow, but no brilliant ideas were coming to him. Kazan was nowhere to be found when he woke that morning, still on time for his personal early morning training. Throwing some slop in a bowl and eating rapidly, he sped through his drills with feverish intensity in order to throw himself back into chores, all with the express intent of gaining himself some free time for the day. The trainers were fairly lenient with their scheduling if you did everything else you were supposed to do and attended mandatory sparring practice. Naruto lost those, again, with as much grace as he could muster. Ears pummeled him, Torin trounced him, and the others were often just excessively drawn-out ties that usually Tanaka declared wins for his opponents. Despite that, they had no easy time defeating him. Naruto forced them to so thoroughly beat the shit out of him that it made them, eventually, that is, to sigh with pent-up frustration when he wouldn't stay down. He went out of his way to make it annoyingly difficult. That was his pride talking, salvaging what he could of his terrible situation. It was hard to suppress his excitement at what might be in his future if he could just crack the secret to this Fuinjutsu project. The wide, almost manic grin he wore on his face while his blades whirled and blocked and scored minor touches, even while losing overall, seemed to unsettle Ears and Torin both and just pissed off the others. They beat him, but he was so happy about what could be in his future, a world with chakra in it, that he unsettled them enough to let him win. Tanaka stood throughout it all, stone-faced as usual. Finished for the day, dismissed unusually early, Naruto sped back to his room and realized Kazan still wasn't there. Probably at the smithy? Dismissing his roommate's absence, Naruto spent a quiet half-hour working when he realized there was a huge commotion in the hallway. Naruto poked his head out to pure bedlam. Porters of all things, dressed in posh clothing, velvet and brass-buttoned military-style jackets with high collars, ran to and fro carrying luggage. Naruto snagged the sleeve on one of them as he ran by. This guy didn't have anything in his hands, and the sheer look of loathing and disgust on the man's pinched face made Naruto reflexively drop the sleeve. Naruto clenched his teeth. "What's going on?" The man sniffed. "Don't ever touch me without my permission again, vermin. I'm a personal valet to his Lord Gado. He's deigned to grace this disgusting establishment, heavens know why, and I'm about important business." Naruto grabbed the man's sleeve again, and his face bulged. Presumably in outrage. But he needed to know. "Is there Miss Shinobi here too?" The man was red-faced, yanking his sleeve out of Naruto's grip. "I say!" The unmitigated gall. The man fairly sprinted away from him, only looking back as he rounded the corner. Early on, Naruto had found that the gutter was hidden if a public arena that pretty much everyone knew about was to be considered hidden. Shizumi Mansion, the house that Shintoriku and his family lived in, was the public face of it. A sprawling 30,000 square foot monstrosity, or so the rumors went. How anyone could afford that much real estate in one of the most populous cities in the world was beyond him. Presumably, Gato would be staying upstairs, but usually clandestine things transpired in abundance down below, hence the porters probably bringing things up through the water-based canal entrances opposite where Naruto had been brought in the first time. The ramp and the canal were spaced pretty close together. Bubbling anxiety clenched his stomach, but all Naruto felt was anger. Anger at the situation, anger at Kazan for not being there when he needed him, anger at the Irionin for not having all the answers, angry at the hidden mist for being here of all places. Angry. Naruto's fist was clenched, and his nails, uncut for months, drew crescent-shaped bloody holes in his palm. Naruto drew a long, shuddering breath, then let it out in a gust. What was his next move? No dice with the Fuinjutsu. No real plans for escape, except for what old lady Chiyo mentioned, which Naruto wasn't even really sure he was sold on her being able to swing. Miss Shinobi were potentially here and possibly being alerted to him being here. That wasn't a guarantee, nor was it even super likely, but on the off chance it was the case, Naruto and Kazan needed to make an escape now. He didn't know how, didn't know the details, but this shit was busy as hell and maybe that was their ticket. Naruto eyed the valet walking across the hallway in front of him, in quite a hurry. The valet, who was thoroughly impressed with himself, didn't notice the Uzumaki, who ducked back behind a doorway out of sight. The Uzumaki smiled. It was now or never, and finally, some luck came his way. Chiyo had come by that morning, speaking of a general plan, but still no specifics. It was too late though, because his window had almost closed. This was his only way out. With or without Chiyo. So he'd take it. The collar was itchy, sticking up almost to his ears. The coat was too big, hanging off him in folds. The hat was too big, flopping around on his head. Thankfully, he had so much hair it filled the excess space somewhat. As Naruto walked, he juggled his loose pants and the luggage he piled up in front of his face to hide it. If he hadn't had such excellent balance, there was a better than even chance he would have spilled everything and caused such a scene that he would have been caught immediately. 2 lefts and the longest hallway in the history of the world saw him to the door of his room, from where he beat the shit out of the stupid valet and stashed his body in a storeroom. He knew it was only a matter of time before they discovered the body, so he needed to move quickly. Hence this insane plan he put together only when he laid eyes on that valet. Now or nothing. No Fuinjutsu to save him. No Chio. No Mifune. Naruto could only rely on himself and Kazan. Naruto laid down his burdens quickly, pounding on the door to their shared space. Kaz! Open the door, let's go! No answer. Naruto struggled with himself, palms sweaty. This was not the time, not the time. He entered the room and stopped. Kaz still wasn't there. Artwork was strewn about the floor, pencils left in an untidy mess. That wasn't like Kaz. Backing out of the room, Naruto realized he hadn't seen Kaz since the delegation came this morning. Where would Kaz have gone? Good fortune, my ass cheeks. Naruto heard in his head Yojimba talking about the fact that no plan survives contact with the real world. It is how you deal with those unexpected things that determine success. So adapt, idiot. Naruto thought about all the places Kaz could possibly be: smithy, kitchen, their shared room, and that was it. No place else. Was it possible something happened? He'd already checked those places, minus the smithy. But there wasn't anything happening today that needed the smithy, and he'd cleaned it last night in preparation for today. Would he really be there? Closing the door and gathering the luggage again, Naruto was acutely aware of the rising exponential risk of discovery if he was seen wearing the livery of a Gato valet in a place he wasn't supposed to be. The smithy was furthest underground with vents nearest the canal. Most big places had coal-fired furnaces to heat the place, so any of the smoke wouldn't be remarked upon, as it was pretty common. Naruto hurried through the halls as fast as he dared, taking the corners and stairs by memory. The corridors were darker down here, less well-lit than the training floor. None of that mattered, as he took it almost at a run. He encountered a grand total of 12 people. None of them so much as looked at him with all the luggage. Naruto grinned. His plan would work. It would. He just needed Kaz. Stopping at the large double doors worked with banded steel, he pushed against them to open them, and his hand met resistance. Locked. Kaz wouldn't be in a place locked as it was. Dead end. A choking feel squeezed his throat and his pulse raced. Naruto could hear his own heartbeat in his head. He wouldn't leave Kaz. He wouldn't. Naruto dumped the luggage and slumped against the wall opposite the door, and pushed himself to think and not give in to panic. If Naruto left without Kaz, Kaz was dead. Every fiber of his body cried out against that, but if Naruto stayed, Kaz and Naruto were both dead for what he'd done to that valet. Let alone what would happen when Miss found him, as he was so sure they would. Come Yomi or high water, swords had to come out now. Anything that was required to get them out, he would do. So, step 1, locate Kaz. Then anything was on the table. Naruto backtracked through the corridors, ducking behind corners and in shadowy alcoves every time he thought he saw someone wearing either the livery of a servant or the rough linen of the trainers. What took him 5 minutes with the luggage was a 40-minute, pulse-pounding mindfuck of a journey. But it was only after passing, briefly and just on an off-chance, near the corridor that housed empty bedrooms that he heard muffled shouting and what sounded like crying. Naruto looked around the corner he'd stopped against to peer down the corridor, and saw 2 burly Yakuza heavies. Tanaka had gone over what to expect with Gato's entourage in order to prevent misunderstandings. They were told never to argue with whatever the Yakuza identified by their thorough tattoos covering arms, neck, really any available skin wanted. If a man wearing tattoos like that said jump, you would ask how high. 2 of them, wearing suits, had bladed weapons at their hips, and one even had a long sword strapped to their back and were stationed doing what Naruto could only guess was guard duty. A tall man, roughly the same size as Kazan, exited the room and spoke to the two on guard. A red cherry blossom tattoo sleeve contrasted head to toe red silks, accented in various ways by loose pants and a gold earring in the shape of a wolf and one tanned ear. Naruto had a sneaking suspicion this was someone he never wanted to meet in person. Even from the side, Naruto saw this man had a cruel cast to his face. The man's knuckles, which he was wiping on a handkerchief handed to him by one of the heavies, were bloody and cut up. Readjusting his pants, the man smirked at one, said something that made the other laugh and waved behind him, walking further down the corridor. The taller of the two heavies, the one with the handkerchief, peeled off and followed his charge. That left just one lone guard. Naruto hesitated, struggling. He'd crossed off every possible location that was readily accessible without exposing himself to high-traffic areas. This was out of the way. Something shady was clearly going on, and on top of that, there was at least someone in trouble in that room. But in all possibilities, this was interfering directly with someone high up in Gato's entourage, and whatever he was doing had absolutely nothing to do with Naruto himself. Naruto knew he shouldn't even be there. But Kazan could be in trouble. Or someone could be. Naruto's luck had always been atrocious, so this was probably a huge mistake that would lead to the death of everyone he currently cared about. No decision at all, really. As carefully and as casually as he could, Naruto put his head down and looked like he was hurrying somewhere as he strolled through the hallway. Each foot he came closer, his pulse seemed to ramp up, till he was within a handspan of the mountainous Yakuza and his heartbeat slammed in his ears like a drum. Eyes locked to the blade poking up over the man's shoulders, Naruto barely heard the question. "Huh?" I said, "What business do you have down here? You shouldn't be here." "Oh, Master Tanaka sent me down here to clean the storeroom. Chores." Naruto shrugged one shoulder in what can you do kind of way. The man relaxed. Until Naruto heard the sobbing coming through the door. His eyes sharpened, darting to the door. The man's eyes did exactly the same, sharpening and darting to the door, then their eyes met as recognition seeped through him. Naruto knew without a shadow of a doubt that he'd found Kazan. Naruto would never forget the sound of the big child sobbing from the day they'd first met, when Naruto had promised him that he'd never let anything else bad happen to him. Rage built and pushed against his self-control like a dam at capacity. Who had Naruto ever been kidding? His self-control had always been a joke. His control wasn't a dam so much as an IOU stapled to a cluster of logs, so the Yakuza thug might as well have been moving in slow motion for all the chance he had as that flimsy control broke and Naruto's hand clenched. Maybe it was a feeling of static in the air, or the overt murderous intention in his violet eyes, crackling like a thunderstorm with restrained violence, but the man moved for his weapon. "Don't do it, kid!" Naruto ignored the words, well past speaking, and speared his elbow into the man's stomach, doubling him over. Huge hands grabbed for him, wheezing, and Naruto pushed them almost gently off his centerline, making the man stumble forward. The Yakuza heavy was exactly that though, and he straightened quickly, showing his worth, spinning and throwing a straight jab that caught exactly nothing as Naruto ducked under it, landing in a crouch, staring at the man's waist. Using the downward momentum of his crouch, he bounced, reversed, powering one bony rage-powered knee straight into the man's crotch. When that doubled the heavy over, Naruto reached across the broad back straining the suit of the Yakuza, undid the latch on the long sword, and in one smooth movement, drew the weapon and spun away. The reverse cut painted the far wall with arterial spray in one smooth motion. Naruto watched the ruined throat pulse with blood, an eruption from jagged flesh, a botched decapitation, and felt nothing but contempt. Death wasn't anything new, not anymore. Further, these were traitors to the Fire Country government and the Leaf Village, and he knew that because Miss Shinobi were invited into the capital city by these backstabbing asshole gangsters. One less would be a boon to the world. They had Kazan too. Naruto left the body cooling on the floor, already committed to his path, and burst through the door to a scene from a horror film. Kazan, naked and sobbing, bruised and bloody, curled up in a ball like he had when they first met. The rage rose like a leviathan in the deep, curling about his heart. One had died, now there would be others. Naruto put his blade down on a table near the door and hugged Kazan, rocking him, not saying anything. He wasn't sure how long they stayed like that, but Naruto was acutely aware that they very much needed to leave, so slowly, ever so slowly, Naruto pulled Kazan's weight onto him and attempted to stand, staggering a bit. Sage, Kaz, you weigh as much as a frickin' buffalo. We gotta go, man, can you stand on your own? Kaz just sniffled. Well, I'm definitely not dressing you. Here, Naruto handed him the bundle of ratty clothes he'd rummaged around in the room to find. He desperately tried to ignore the bloodstains and other unidentifiable substances radiated throughout the room. The rage hummed in his stomach, a blackness that echoed her voice. Naruto didn't need to ask who did this to Kazan. He knew. It was that man from earlier, the man with blood, Kazan's blood, on his hands. Kazan had himself together, clothed, but his head was down, eyes bloodshot, tear tracks making clean tracks on a dirty face. Naruto was aware of the fact he couldn't fight Tanaka, or the other trainers, or even the other trainees now one-on-one. He'd give himself even odds, maybe, against the lower ranks, but not the higher ones. Sheer ferocity made up a lot of ground, but not against that. Not without chakra. Kazan, look at me, buddy. The gentle giant swiveled his eyes up and peeked at him from his downturned shaggy brown mop. Those clear green eyes, innocent, had something missing from them today. We're escaping. Today. Green eyes widened. Terror filled them or something else, Naruto wasn't sure. But he put his hand on Kazan's arm and squeezed. I've already made a mess of things, but we need to get to Granny Chio. She'll help us. Shouts rang out in the hallway. Naruto's heart raced, and he snatched up the long sword, still covered in now drying blood. He threw open the door with the other hand and met the startled gaze of the other Yakuza heavy. Naruto's gaze narrowed. The man was just in time to grab the sharp steel launched at him in a thrust with both hands as the 2.5-foot blade plunged straight through the man's chest. Naruto found himself snarling as he drove the man into the wall where the blade pinned the tattooed guard like a bug on a collection board. There were more people in the hallway. Get behind me, Kaz. Kaz wasted no time in ducking back into the room. 3 people moved forward. 2 of the nondescript men were simply more guards, like the 2 he'd already killed. Those wouldn't be too difficult. Gato notoriously hated shinobi and so never employed them, preferring regular mercenaries. That was all to the good here. Naruto never would have escaped from a gutter knife, a shinobi light, let alone a trained ninja. The wave symbol, Black Ocean, was etched on their uniforms. The third was a walking dead man. Oh, he didn't know it, but before today was done that's what he'd be. This fucker would be dead. Naruto called down the hallway, Are you the one who hurt Kazan? The 2 heavies moved forward without prompting, both drawing blades, short, wakizashi most likely, to easily maneuver in close quarters. Naruto's longer blade would be a detriment. The exchange was brief, blurred. The steel made a wet, slurping sound as he pulled it out of the chest of the pinned guard. Naruto ignored the thump of the body hitting the ground behind him. It was the one with the earring, dressed in those fancy clothes, that was the target here, consequences be damned. The cruel face with the hooked nose and sharp cheekbones. Naruto supposed some girls would find him pretty, or something. He wrinkled his nose. Kaz stuck his head out. Kaz, go find the Irionin. Her name is Chio, you remember? She'll help you get out. I'll follow in a second. So many emotions, many of which Naruto was sure Kaz could never express, rolled across Kaz's face. Naruto aimed a casual kick at him, to get him to move. The giant moved, looking back as he retreated down the hallway. Good. The giant baby was surprisingly squeamish about violence. There was one time where he threw a half-hour tantrum because Naruto had squished a bug. Pacifist at heart was Kazan. This whole thing was no doubt tearing at him inside. That just made Naruto madder. Kazan deserved to live in a world where violence was the exception, not the norm. Someday, buddy, someday. For now, though. Naruto knelt, and wiped the streaks of blood off his blade on the mangled suit jacket of the downed Yakuza and let all the pain, all the rage, all the injustice of this whole fucking system rise in him till he didn't know where he began and the pain and rage ended. Did it ever end? What's your name? The well-dressed man had a casual smile. Mine is Liano Gado, son of the great Sakuma Gado. Surely you've heard of us? Naruto threw himself at the nearest guard in a leap the man clearly did not expect and was inside his wild overhead strike in an instant, deflecting the deadly edge with the flat of his long sword in a right-to-left guard. Both hands wrapped around the hilt gave his backhand swing the power to carve a furrow in the man's chest that erupted in a back spray of blood. The scarlet eruption was acrid and metallic on the bits that touched his lips. Liano Gado was not fazed by half his guard going down in less than 30 seconds. Had he never been seriously threatened before? Why do you care about such a lowly creature? He is an idiot, a retarded specimen of boy flesh that can barely speak like a human being, though quite tender and tight. Liano's mouth more resembled a slash than a grin. Revulsion stopped him for a second, those words processing, not quite understanding, but instinctively knowing horror at those words. Kaz. But it was the rage pushing him forward. The voice was there, whispering to him at the edge of his mind. It sounded a lot like the lady from before, a whispering madness that demanded he trim these weeds. I'll overlook this mindless animal ferocity if you lay down your weapon and surrender. I'll even put in a good word with my father to have you spared, but continue on this ill-considered course of action, and I will have you flayed, your skin prepared as a carpet for my childhood bedroom. All of it was delivered in the same flat, slightly mocking tone, as if the outcome either way didn't bother him in the slightest. Naruto didn't answer as the next guard was coming at him, snarling. He met him, snarl for snarl, trading blows that rattled through his arm. Nothing fazed him. Naruto wove a web of steel, turning blow after blow into counterattack after counterattack, trying to reach the man's vital points. One particular hit, slightly off, slightly too slow, enabled Naruto to reach out with the razor edge and score a deep cut in the man's thigh. Agony painted the man's face, and Naruto punched out with his opposing fist, cracking the cartilage in his throat. Choking, dropping his weapon, the man collapsed with a bulging face, bluish and getting darker as he choked, sputtering like some mean animal. Naruto kicked him in the face and stepped across the tangle of bodies in the corridor, ignoring the blood and the bits. His hair fairly dripped with it. Naruto could feel it sliding down the sides of his face, pooling under his chin and falling onto his clothes. He was a painter only using a particular shade of red. Steadily he walked toward Liano Gado. The man turned to run. Naruto had a sick satisfaction watching the realization that none of his guards would be there to help him, that every one of those goons who he used to make himself seem bigger than he was, were slaughtered like they meant nothing. There was now nothing between him and his death. The whole encounter was so quick. Naruto truly had gotten faster. Not fast enough for his purposes, but faster. Gado's son couldn't get away if he offered him all the money in the world. Not if he had a miraculous way to bring his chakra back under his control. Not even then. Naruto threw his sword, whipping it overhand, and heard the beautiful scream. In a second, he threw himself feet first onto the air to Gado Corporation, and was hauling his head back by his hair, Naruto's full weight on his back. Naruto crouched, one hand tangled in the curated, not so perfectly coiffed hair, and the other put the leading edge of the slightly curved blade against the tender skin of the throat. He could feel the man shaking. A stench of acrid piss filled the air. All of a sudden, it was like a window, or a door, had opened in his mind. Something was there with him, inhabiting the same space. Something vast. Old. Beautiful. Terrible. Kill him. Kill him. Kill him. There. A flash of impossible, beautiful, perfection, 3 eyes, horns, white hair, red. White, black. White, spinning red. She was in him. She was him. She was everything. She was the key to everything. And she was the end of everything. Naruto shook his head, trying to close the door. Kill him. This was his head, So the door shut, but he and the voice wanted the same thing. This time. Naruto screamed, shutting a mental door on the vision? Dream? Nightmare? Imagination? Whatever it was, they'd wanted the same thing. So he did it. Pulling the sword across Lianogado's throat in a vicious pull that Naruto felt in his hands, in his fingers, tingling across his body as his victim seized, the agonized screaming cut off as Naruto left him gurgling and spitting blood on the floor. The youngest Gado's lungs had filled with blood and the sick piece of shit started choking, but no amount of effort would stave off the darkness now. Naruto didn't care. Whirling the hilt, stabbing downward, Naruto sneered. He pinned the heir and precious son of that piece of shit Gado to the floor like shish kebab, meat on a stick. Naruto didn't look back. This was about what was right and what was wrong. Kazan deserved better. He deserved better. Naruto left the carnage at a dead run. If someone had explained the irony of what he wanted for Kaz and what Naruto had done, he would have found it hard to care. Even if Chio hadn't spent the better part of 40 years as a highly experienced and trained shinobi and could hear a pin drop from 500 feet away with the aid of chakra, there would be absolutely no way she could miss the anthill with the giant's foot stuck through it that the gutter became all at once. She doubted there were people in Earth Country that couldn't hear what was going on in the underground arena. Violet eyes like some night creature flashed in her head. When Chio had set eyes on Naruto for the first time, she'd known without a shadow of a doubt that that boy would mean trouble for her and every single person he ever came across. Men, in general, made a lot of work for women, but this boy seemed like he was born with the knack and the nose for getting into 16 different kinds of pear-shaped situations. Today, she hated being right. Adjusting the pack on her back, she pulled along the half-naked bear of a boy sent to her from where Naruto had saved him from the attentions of Lianogato with her as they pushed through the damp and cramped passages she'd found out of the gutter. Water trickled down the walls of the corridor, seeping into a tiny river running between her feet. Lights flickered, set into walls for workmen, no doubt. Kazan was having a hard time squeezing his bulk through, but Chio pushed and pulled and hoped her sheer gumption would get them through this. There was no way she was going back for Naruto. He'd meet them at the rendezvous point at the appointed time, and that was that. If she stayed, she doubted Shin would be kind to her. Not that she had much to worry about on that front. Her collection alone could kill every single man, woman, and child in Shin's little organization, but she had promised the boy she'd get him and his friend out. Presumably without making a mess. Now she could only safely succeed at one thing: get Kazan out. So that's what she was doing. If only her brother could see her now. As she walked, conscious of the sweaty child's hand in hers, she cursed herself 1,000 ways for the foolish revenge quest that brought her out of Wind Country and here, to this Fire Country shithole, looking for her grandson. Instead, she found some smartass kid that looked like the 4th Hokage and who happened to have a broken seal. Kazan ran into her back. Chio hadn't realized she'd stopped. No. But it all made sense. She'd met the 4th during his annual visits to Fire's Wind allies. Sunigakure had pulled out all the stops. All the elders, like herself, had been summoned out of retirement to discuss future policy in a geopolitical security summit. The boy, no, Naruto, was the spitting image of his no-doubt father, though slightly more feral-looking, and he had those curious eyes, no, not the sky blue of his father. Chio started sprinting, anxious to get to Naruto, then stopped. Why did she care? But she knew why, even if she couldn't say it out loud. Those eyes had looked like Gaara's before Pakura and Chio had killed his father and freed him and his siblings during the Civil War. Gaara's eyes had been haunted. Dead lamps looking out of an abandoned house. Those eyes were a cry, a begging plea for someone to stay when it seemed like everyone had left. Chio swallowed, all of a sudden feeling her age. She started to sprint again, not wanting to think of sentimentality at her age. No sentimentality from a ninja her age would see her killed. But Naruto needed her. So Chio sped up. Not running, no, but something close to it. Chio of the White Death, legendary former S-class puppet master, would not let it be said she didn't keep her word, and well, that boy might lead her to her grandson. But if she had to tell the truth, and she didn't, all she saw was Gaara looking at her with violet eyes. For the better part of an hour, Naruto had ducked, dodged, murdered, fought, and then slipped away from better fighters than him as he fought for each inch of ground. Shizumi Mansion was enormous and an enormous pain in the ass. Getting out was like staging a prison escape. Which, in a way, it very much was. He'd gone to Chiyo's place and she was gone, but so was Kaz. That meant she was sticking to the last-second plan she told him about in passing that morning under cover of a checkup. Currently, he could only ascribe his current success at escaping, if you could really call it that, to the fact that he so thoroughly pissed off absolutely everyone in this place that literally no one could think straight. Lionel's death had enraged Gato to the point that Naruto was sure he'd made an enemy for life. But it had worked in his favor. Like the fact they were more in each other's way than against him, and that was the only reason he wasn't dead 6 ways from Tuesday. A sword hit his raised blade at an adjusted angle, careering off and protecting his face from losing key features that Naruto found to be important, namely a nose and ear. The sheer force threw him across the room. His back hit something solid, as the fiery knives in his back could attest. The momentum from blocking such a colossal hit threw him up and over the security desk station next to the doors at the front of Shin's palace's entryway. Pain blossomed through his neck now as he finally settled, the pain now bouncing around his insides like a rubber ball, each bounce echoing all the other 100,000 nicks and scrapes and cuts and bruises from his running battle with the gutter's finest and the goddamn army Gato had brought. Naruto lay staring at the ceiling. A stunning scene was painted in gentle colors that swept across his vision. Blues and greens shaded a fairy tale forested glen with a river sweeping through it. Naruto would have given his left arm to be there right now. A shadow darkened the beauty and instinct had him rolling backward, kicking out with one leg and catching his assailant. Naruto didn't even look and started sprinting, listening to the screams to halt and the epithets being thrown at him from his former classmates. Naruto turned and threw up both swords. Turns out there was no need to block because the cavalry arrived and was looking to surround him. 3 enemies ringed him in a semicircle, but they were just the vanguard, Uruchi, Torin, and a kid Naruto didn't know, who looked about the only one excited to be there. Naruto stilled, watching the assailant he knocked down get up. Yet another person he didn't know. That made 4 in his immediate vicinity. Behind them were 3 dozen mercenaries with black oceans stamped across their chests, the symbol of a wave etched in black against a white and red background. They were fanning out, some leaving through side doorways in the palatial entranceway of Shin's home. Behind Naruto was the smoking rubble of what had been 2 massive doors etched in gold trim. Turns out the sandstone was highly susceptible to explosive tags. When Naruto had found them on some of the mercenaries already primed, he couldn't believe his luck. He still had one left. Naruto grinned then winced. His face got fucked up somewhere along the way. It hurt to smile. A lot. Naruto tried to straighten from his wary half-crouch, but stopped when it pulled something in his back. The pain felt like someone had dripped acid straight into his muscles. Memory swam to the fore and he remembered that Uruchi had stabbed him. At least 6 inches worth of blade, generous of him, as he scrambled away from the mercenary he'd killed that was in his way. Naruto tried not to let his pain show on his face. Shintoraku, Tsukumu, and Tanaka parted the now sea of mercenaries lined up facing him, and he had to swallow. He opened his mouth to attempt to buy himself time. Maybe plead for his life a bit. Fucking kill him! Tanaka and Shin looked taken aback. But the place fairly boiled with fury. All of a sudden Tsukumu was screaming incoherently and the mercenaries were surging and Naruto had his second blade in the other hand and blades were coming at him from every direction. 1, 2, 3 and he lost count of the assailants as he rolled and sprinted. Uruchi and Torin lost in the press as he was blocking multiple blades and taking some hits as he backed up towards the door. Naruto spit at Torin, who resurfaced with an overhand blow. Evading everything was impossible, but he did his best to only get hit by the ones he knew weren't immediately fatal. The blonde threw himself into a backward roll away from the deadly blades that crossed near his head and he recovered. Coming up into a crouch that folded into a kick that took a startled Uruchi in the chest as the mercenaries knocked into each other next to them, and one even went down from a swing from Torin, who was clearly irritated and trying to get at Naruto. The battle spilled into the courtyard through his saving grace of the doorway as Naruto did his level best not to get skewered. Frankly, he didn't know why he wasn't dead already, though he suspected it was because there was only so much space. Courtyard meant open space, and open space meant being surrounded, and that meant death. Naruto tripped on a piece of rubble from the exploded hallway and went down, a sword swiping through the space where his head had been, and he had to scoot sideways in order to get room to throw himself forward towards the open gate 15 feet from where he was. Freedom screamed at him. Kaz and Chio would be waiting for him. If only he could just. Frantically he hopped to his feet, blocking the overhead strike from behind, spinning right then left to avoid the second as he stabbed another nameless fuck in the throat, not even bothering to watch him die as he had to throw himself again to the left in order to backpedal against the surging tide of enemies. From his pocket, he awkwardly snatched the explosive tag and slapped it on the flat of his right blade. The left made a huge sweeping strike that pushed all the enemies back, and Naruto then locked eyes with Torin and hurled his blade at him. Torin grabbed the nearest armored black ocean merc and shoved him in the path of the blade, which buried itself in his stomach. Everyone in the courtyard was distracted by the hissing sound of a live explosive as Naruto hauled us out of the gate and into the rapidly dwindling sea of people on the streets next to the open gates. No one wanted to be anywhere near the place where it sounded like a small battle was being fought by various armies. Naruto looked back as he crossed the threshold of Shin's gates just in time to watch the whole courtyard go up in an unexpectedly enormous conflagration. Flames pushed towards him, the shockwave hitting where he stood at the edge of the gate, blowing it at him at high speeds. Naruto felt himself become airborne, and then his already battered body hit something more stubborn than him. An unhelpful voice whispered that it was probably a goddamn wall, and he couldn't help but think he was fucking cursed. Freedom had been so close. Darkness closed in as he found himself rolling off the edge of an embankment and into a ditch near the thoroughfare. Then nothing.